Welcome to the Natural History Cupboard. Come on in.
And welcome back to the Natural History Cupboard podcast, the place where the weird and wonderful parts of the natural world come together. I'm your host, Gareth, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Aaron. Aaron, say hi.
Hi.
What have you been up to?
Actually, not too much.
Surviving the storm?
Yeah, but we're quite lucky. It's not been that bad out here, I don't think.
It's been even better with me. The only thing that I think is affected in my garden is I might lose my eucalyptus tree.
Oh no.
Yeah, the tree is becoming too top heavy and is slowly. It's just getting. It's always.
Does that mean it's planted too shallow?
Its roots have just never gone deeper than what it is, and I've always had a rope tied around it and attached to the fence as a sort of a stay where you are, but it grew too tall, too quick, too bushy at the top, and I think it's paying the price now, and I may end up losing the whole thing, which would be a shame, because I really like that tree, and it's been there since the day I moved in. You know, we planted it. It was one of the first ones I planted in there, but if it's gonna go now, I'd rather have it go now than 5-10 years time and actually cause some damage.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, sorry, what have you been up to?
Like I said, not really all that much. To be honest with you, I have been, as I don't think we've mentioned on the podcast, but we're going for Christmas. We're going to my other half Atta's family out in Gran Canaria, and that means I'm having to do extra homework for the podcast. So I've been mostly
You'll be
on
filming some location, I'm guessing, and getting loads of wildlife.
I do want to find the lizards, but
the lizards of which you could not find a single one of, and
that was Tenerife.
Yeah, I know, but still, I don't get how
in the end in Loro Park.
I just don't know how you could miss them. Really, they're everywhere.
Hopefully find the big Gran Canaria lizard.
You'll have to do your Steve Irwin bit.
Yeah. No, I've just been writing up creature features and stuff in preparation to be gone for a few weeks.
Yeah. Well, other than my trees falling over, I don't think I've done a huge amount either. It's been one of those weeks. It's been a bit wet and miserable outside, and
it has been.
I as much as I want to get outside and do stuff, it's far nicer just sitting indoors when it's wet and miserable, to just hide away from it all. But
I tell you what, this is completely off topic, but the other night I sat down and watched The Amazing Spider-Man.
That's very off topic.
It is, but the reason why I bring it up is because we've been talking about microRNAs and stuff. You don't get much of like the whole genetic stuff in like the Tobey Maguire ones and the Tom Holland ones, but in that Andrew Garfield one, the first one at least, they talk quite a bit about microRNAs and stuff like that. It was pretty cool to hear it, and then remember that we've even got a Patreon, Matt, who is actually intricately involved in microRNAs.
So he's making himself into Spider-Man.
Are you?
I don't know. That might be. Well, actually,
teach me how.
You've just spurred my mind. I have seen a film within the last couple of weeks, which kind of fits. One of my favorite all-time zoo-based comedy films.
Zoo-based comedy.
Well, it came off the back of watching with my child, the Road to El Dorado, the animated film, which highly underrated for what it is. I think it's a brilliant film.
Yeah, it's a good film.
But because some of the actors that do the voices for it, Kenneth Branagh, Walking with Dinosaurs, and Kelvin Klein, Kevin Klein, not Kelvin Klein. That's a brand of clothing, isn't it? Kevin Klein, who is in a very good film that I then had to watch off the back of that, not with my child, because it's a bit, they're not age appropriate, I suppose. Fierce Creatures, a brilliant film. Have you ever seen it?
No, I've never seen that.
It has possibly one of the best casts you'll come across. It's got Ronnie Corbett in it.
Right.
It's got Michael Palin. It's
Okay.
got John Cleese.
Okay, I can already see where this is going. Yeah.
It is a film set in a zoo. It's also got the, Robert Lindsay as well, the dad from My Family,
Mhm.
or the captain in Hornblower, which is another, like, going off into another film there. It's set in a zoo. It was actually filmed at Durrell Wildlife,
Oh, yeah?
like, on the island of Jersey, so Jersey Zoo. And it is basically a zoo that gets taken over by a big company called the Octopus Company, so they've got their tentacles in everything. And John Cleese is brought in to run the zoo,
Right.
and the whole thing is basically made to be about the most fierce creatures that can possibly be in a zoo, and it's a really good film. Really just a funny film anyway, but watching it from, like a zoo angle sort of thing, it's a really good film.
I'll
I'd
have to
highly recommend to
look that
anyone
up.
to watch Fierce Creatures. I've got it on DVD, and I'll lend it to you to watch. I'm fairly certain I've got it somewhere. If you still have a DVD player,
Well, yeah.
there you go. That's pretty much all I've been doing. So should we head into the news?
Let's hop to it.
Yeah.
It's the news!
Right, well, we're into this week's news. I believe I'm kicking things off.
You are kicking things off this week.
I'll rip the band-aid off, as it were, because we're going to start off with some bad news. I can see more of these sort of stories in the next 4 years to come.
Oh no!
Yeah,
I already know where this is going.
That kind of news already. So this is from CBS News. More than $100,000 reward offered after protected Mexican gray wolf found dead in Arizona. Wildlife officials have offered a reward of $103,500 for information to the potential or to the death of a protected wolf in Arizona. This was a female Mexican gray wolf that was found near Flagstaff, Arizona, on November the 7th. And essentially, because they are protected under the Endangered Species Act, they are, well, it's illegal to kill them, basically.
For now.
Yeah, and sadly. They've not shared the details about the animal's cause of death, but have noted the mortality was not related to the agency's management actions. So somebody's involved in doing this. Sad news, that one.
Well, that's ridiculous. So my first article comes to us from Live Science, and the headline reads: Woman accidentally discovers 280-million-year-old lost world while hiking in Italian Alps. So Claudia Stephenson and her husband were walking in the Valtellina Orobi Mountains last year when, a few paces behind her partner, she stepped on a rock shelf featuring markings that drew her attention. The markings turned out to be footprints that would inspire a scientific investigation of the site, yielding evidence of an entire Permian ecosystem.
Going, God blimey, who put that there? So, got some good news, though.
Yay!
Stuff. This is from ITV News, which we don't tend to often think about them when it comes to a lot of accurate information.
Probably for good reason.
Yeah. But this one's good. Water voles returning to the west of England's rivers and streams after 20-year absence. So Ratty from Wind of the Willows is back in a lot of these places. Water voles are now making a proper return in a lot of rivers right the way throughout the West Country. I included the Ratty bit, but I knew it was going to be in most of the descriptions of these things, and they almost certainly go straight for that. Not many people, I think, younger than us would probably know who Ratty from Wind of the Willows is. But they were basically pushed to the brink by the introduction of North American mink, and a huge initiative that has gone on for a long while now, and some newer initiatives with the West of England Nature Partnership, otherwise known as WENP. I don't know whether it's meant to be said like that or not. In collaboration with the Bristol Zoo Society, they brought back these to the Severn shoreline, the levels, and the moors around there as well. What's really helped is by bringing back otters. By bringing back otters, which are actually predators of water voles, you would think that would be a negative in doing that, but they've actually developed a taste for eating mink.
That's
so
right, yeah.
They've been trapping mink for many years to eradicate them, and by using traps that are floating on the water surface where mink like to go and investigate, they'll go in there. But the otters, which have now returned because we've basically brought them back as well, are seeing those cages where the mink has been trapped in to be taken away and humanely disposed of as a floating lunchbox. And otters have got particularly strong jaws and will just bite through and eat the mink, which has brought their numbers down, which has meant that water voles have come back in better numbers. And it's yet again an example of, you bring back the predator, you bring back the ecosystem that is surrounded by them. So yeah,
fantastic.
Good news, that one.
Yeah. Speaking of fantastic news, The Guardian is my next source. Slovenian girl 12 saves project aiming to reintroduce cicadas to New Forest.
Nice.
Yeah. So when a task force of British conservationists travelled to Slovenia this past summer, they came back empty-handed. The hope was that these stinging cicadas could re-establish the species in the New Forest. But with the lack in yield, hopes were somewhat dashed. Cue 12-year-old Slovenian and daughter of the Airbnb hosts that were hosting the conservationists, Christina Kender, who has offered to put out purpose-built nets to hopefully catch enough of the grasshopper-sized species to do the job. So good luck to her.
So my next article from the BBC. Would you believe it? Oh, they're going real bad puns on this one. Wales is losing sheep. So it does go straight into talking about stereotypes when you think of Wales.
Of course.
Is rugby, which they then, it being the BBC, it being an English thing, is just a nice little jab there at the fact that Wales have 10 on the 11 losses in a row now, which, yeah, wonderful. Although Scotland beat Australia, so I'm happy with that. Anyway, completely off the topic. Back to Wales. Rugby and sheep are generally seen as two quite large stereotypical things about Wales, saying that there's more sheep in Wales than there are people. Well, believe it or not, the sheep are disappearing. And that's not through some sort of, I don't know, wolves roaming around and collecting them, or people just stealing sheep. This is basically to do with the numbers of sheep and farmers who are keeping them are dropping. For a variety of different reasons, it's been said. There doesn't seem to be one defining factor. Money is a big defining factor, though. It's not as profitable, and it's through a variety of things. Brexit has not helped British farmers, despite a lot of farmers voting for it. And what we've seen of late with British farmers protesting and pointing out about an inheritance tax and things like that, they're obviously vocal about things. However, the fact that sheep are no longer as profitable, and the fact that Brexit seems to have done a number on British farms, doesn't seem to be as big an issue. But with the disappearance of sheep from the countryside, that actually is kind of a good thing in some ways from a conservation point of view.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We could go to being farming in more sustainable ways, or doing different practices on the land, and get away from the idea of the only thing you can have there is sheep. Although I would say, in defense of sheep, and if Drew is watching this, he'll know that he's not a fan of sheep because of the issues that they cause. To hear his full tirade on that, go back and watch the High Brown Fritillary episode, where he basically lets loose. He was honest about his views on sheep. Best with mint sauce, I believe, is probably his view. His view aside, I think that we should be trying to do as much as we can to support having British lamb in the shops as opposed to New Zealand lamb, which is a massive carbon problem, because it's much easier and cheaper to import lamb from the other side of the planet, the literal other side of the planet, New Zealand is the antipode of Britain. If you were to drill straight through, you would come out just off the coast of New Zealand from Britain. But basically, we are spending far more money importing lamb from the other side of the planet as opposed to using far less effort to bring it from the local area. And it's going to taste exactly the same. The difference being shops want the cheapest thing possible, and farmers can't produce that any cheaper than it could be produced in other countries. But from a carbon footprint point of view, we should be eating locally. We should be consuming things that have not come from out of a certain area. But that has to start with a change in the way that we reward companies for basically going for the lowest price possible.
Yeah.
We should be paying our farmers more to farm sustainably, and we should be basically using that to our advantage to offset carbon and things like that. Anyway, mini farm rant there for you.
My final article is actually about farming too.
Yeah.
But it's in Europe and is actually positive. So it comes to us from the news source Fast Company, and the headline reads: Denmark is returning 15% of its farmland back to nature. So farms growing crop feed for livestock are being approached by the government to return some of their land to forest, and other farmland areas are to be returned to peatlands in an effort to cut the country's emissions in preparation for their target of a 70% reduction by 2030. The efforts to become more environmentally friendly are agreed across the political landscape. So election results and opposing parties are really not keen to act against each other on this. They're unified on the environment.
Weird.
Could you imagine?
That's almost worthy of just being the news story.
It is, yeah. I didn't want to leave it, though, because the way our episode's gonna fall, I'm not gonna get a main article for a while. Anyway, they've been working together on this, and they've managed to cut emissions on a sector by sector basis, basically looking at it logically and doing it bit by bit. And the effort is possibly the first serious change to be taken on by any country, especially in the realm of emissions from the food sector. And it just goes to show it can be done.
Yeah. Impressive.
Most impressive. But that just about wraps it up for our news this week. All we've got left to do is go through the main article.
Yeah.
That's with you this week.
So we're looking at the Smithsonian Magazine, and it's the uncovering of a mystery that has gone on for 25 years.
Right.
Back in 2000, a mystery mollusk was found. This is now been described as a new species of sea slug. So the sea slug itself has been called Bathodevius Chordodactylus. I'm guessing because it's from the Bathanic region of the ocean, and it is rather devious to have found. So it's taken 2 decades, essentially, or 2 decades and a bit, for scientists to basically identify this creature that was first encountered in 2000. They were looking for various different species in underwater exploration off the west coast of America, in and around Monterey Bay and areas like that off the coast of California. And they basically spent a huge amount of time looking for different things, and they came across this mystery mollusk. So in February of 2000, the scientists on board one of these research vessels spotted this glowing creature at roughly 8,576 feet below the surface of the Pacific Ocean using an ROV camera, remote operated underwater vehicle, in the midnight zone. Which the instant I hear that, the fact that I end up watching the Octonauts with my child, I just hear the little song that the Yeti crabs sing about it in one of the episodes. We live in the midnight zone, in the dark but not alone. It's a very good episode.
I think that's your next TikTok video for the
Dressing
podcast.
as the Yeti crab.
Yeah,
I like the Yeti crab.
and singing that song.
So using this camera, they basically came across an area where they saw some bioluminescence. Then the midnight zone is as you'd expect, it's pitch black. No light gets to that point. So most of the creatures use bioluminescence in some form or another to basically show up and either attract prey or to discourage predators and various different things. So they nicknamed this animal the mystery mollusk because they couldn't really quite figure out what it was. It sort of looks like it was made up from spare parts left over from the making of a bunch of other animals, says Bruce H. Robinson, an ecologist at the Monterey Bay Aquarium and Research Institute, in an interview with NPR a couple of weeks ago. So after 2 decades and a bit, this animal has definitely been described as a new species of nudibranch sea slug, basically, which is a fantastic group of creatures that includes the glaucus, the
sea dragon.
Yeah. Beautiful little species, which you annoyingly see people doing stupid things with and then paying the price by the fact that they are highly venomous. The Spanish dancer as well, which is one of my favorite species of sea slug that has that undulating way of moving and looks like a proper Spanish flamenco dancer, doing the whole twirling of the dress sort of thing. Well, they found more of these. In fact, they went back and had a look, and they even essentially went up and down the California coast and even to the Mariana Trench, where in all, in the Western Pacific, they've now observed 157 individuals from this mystery mollusk species. So they are exceedingly well documented now. Most of them were found between 3,300 feet deep and 10,700 feet deep. But a handful of them live even deeper than 10,700 feet down, inhabiting right the way down to 13,150 feet below the surface. They are basically just in the most darkest depths of the ocean. So to understand the animal as well, the identity of it has basically been worked out by DNA sequencing, which, let's face it, is the best way of working out exactly where something sits in the tree of life, and if they can do that. But yes, that's what allowed them to place it into the nudibranchs. It is an odd-looking creature. This thing definitely does look like a collection of parts left over or glued together, sort of like a jellyfish stuck to a plastic bag, stuck to some other bits, and
it's a very odd-looking animal.
It is odd, and I can completely understand why this animal got called the mystery mollusk. But there you go. We've got a brand new species of nudibranch to add to things. So yeah, I can't believe that we've not done more nudibranchs or talked about them more. I think we should definitely do them next year. That's one to add to the
very
list.
least glaucus should be done, shouldn't it?
Yeah, a really pretty little species that I would say there's not a lot of information that is known about them in general. Most people just see them and not really know what on earth they are.
That's true, yeah.
But yeah. Well, should we head into our creature feature for this week?
Let's do it.
Cool.
It's the creature feature.
Okay, well, we're into this week's creature feature. Aaron, what are we looking at?
Well, if I were to say to the average person on the street, describe a kangaroo for me, the immediate image they would conjure would be of a somewhat large reddish-brown animal shaped somewhere between a deer and a velociraptor, as hench as Arnold Schwarzenegger and bounding around the arid, grassy scrublands of the Australian outback at great speed. What they probably wouldn't describe is a small tree-dwelling kangaroo-like animal. However, despite the terrestrial kangaroos of Australia being far better known, their distant tree-dwelling cousins, the tree kangaroos, are just as cool, if not a little bit more so.
Very originally named as well.
Yeah, tree kangaroo. That's like snow leopard.
It's a leopard.
Looks a bit like a leopard, lives in the snow. Yeah, it looks a bit like a kangaroo, lives in a tree. Yeah, humans are fantastic at naming things.
I'm surprised why we don't have pond duck or
sea duck.
Yeah, well, we do have sea ducks.
Well, no,
there you go. We're just terrible at this.
There you go. Yeah, perfect example. Now, though their evolutionary history is a little unclear, we think that they may have started out with an ancestor very much part of the ancestral pademelons. Now, these pademelons would have had to adapt rapidly over the course of several generations to the ever-drying habitats of Australia and of the Australian and New Guinean Eocene. Now, With rainforests disappearing, they take advantage of the rocky outcrops with a variety of plant life that would kind of thrive in such kind of barren, arid conditions. And we think that this period of adaptation and climatic change would have seen the pademelons give rise to the rock wallabies with a more generalist dietary kind of preference.
Really cool animals, rock wallabies.
Extremely cool animals, worthy of a creature feature as well. Now, this would serve their ancestors really well, as the rock wallabies were able to adapt to the Asian forests that were being introduced to Australia during the Miocene. And these rainforest-type habitats would then kickstart the next wave of rapid adaptation in this evolutionary tree, as the generalist rock wallabies would start finding themselves just as at home up a tree as they were on a rocky ledge. Perhaps the first ones might have been a bit confused, but yeah. And by the end of the Miocene, the fossil record appears to point to these rock wallabies in particular being the branch from which the now extinct tree kangaroos would have sprouted. But this wasn't the end for the tree kangaroo lineage, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this specific species. The extinct genus Bora was forced to change once again by the coming of the Great Ice Age of the Pleistocene. Global cooling very much affected the landscape of Australia and New Guinea, with the rainforest retreating once more and again giving way to dry, arid environments, the type of environments we very much associate Australia with, to be honest. Now, the Bora species became increasingly isolated, each population adapting rapidly to the specific set of environmental pressures that were applied in these different areas. They adapted to diverse regions of very fractured rainforest, and they climbed higher for forging a life for themselves and their descendants in the tree canopies. And so the Bora genus of yesterday brought forth the Dendrolagus genus of today, to which all the tree or all the extant tree kangaroo species today, they belong to that genus. Today, when we talk about tree kangaroos, there are 14 species, potentially 15, pending further study, of tree kangaroo found living across Australia and Papua New Guinea. And they are all of them in need of some level of conservation or protection of some kind, with the luckiest species being defined as near threatened. And most being considered vulnerable, unfortunately. And one of there's also 3 that are classified as critically endangered, and one of those was, up until 2018, thought to be completely extinct.
Oh, wow.
They were rediscovered in 2018. But that is a story for another creature feature, because the species that I'd like to talk about in this episode primarily is the Goodfellow's tree kangaroo. Also known as the ornate tree kangaroo, and I tend to prefer that name just because it's easier to say. This species is, in my opinion, and I think Gareth will agree because we had a little bit of a chat about this last week, they're the most stunning of the genus.
It's my favourite one because it's the only, well, I'm biased, it's the only one that I've ever got up close to.
Right, fair enough.
But I do think it is by far the nicest looking.
Which is saying something, because this is a group of animals that is incredibly cute and colourful.
Yeah. Very colourful for a kangaroo.
Yeah. For marsupials, a lot of the time when you imagine marsupials, they're usually uniform colour. Not necessarily the same colour, but they're usually quite uniform. Tassie devils, I think of.
Numbats have got quite varied colours as well.
They do. That's fair. Yeah, but yeah, most of the time you think of quite a uniform coloration. Now, as you'd expect from 2 similar animals living and taking up totally different niches in totally different habitats, the Goodfellow's tree kangaroo is very different in appearance to the bouncing ground dwellers it's distantly related to. For starters, let's take a look at its fur. It's short and woolly to maintain constant temperature, and rather than a rather uniformly spread dull earth color that we've just been talking about, which actually aids like other kangaroos and other marsupials in hiding amongst the reds and browns and greys of the more arid Australian expanses, this species displays an extremely contrasting counter shading approach to camouflage to hide itself. The deep red chestnut color on the top of the animal helps hide them from above as they cling to trees and trunks and branches and such, whilst the near white blondes of their underside and their arms actually helps them vanish against the bright skies when observing them from below. So they're pretty hard to spot if you're a predator, whether you're airborne or land-based. The next most noticeable difference between a kangaroo and an ornate tree kangaroo is the limbs. Now, the rear limbs are nowhere near as comically large against the forelimbs compared to terrestrial kangaroos, but all forelimbs are thick with muscle. So that is something that is similar to kangaroos, but unlike the more famous kangaroos, the ones in the trees can move all four limbs separately. Whereas you'll see that with the larger terrestrial kangaroos, they have a kind of 5-limb stance and form of locomotion, where if they're not bound in, they will basically put their forelimbs forward and then swing with the weight being held by the forelimbs and the tail. They'll swing the back legs like a pendulum to get them
like
to
a weird 5-legged tripod, which doesn't make sense.
Be a pentapod, wouldn't it?
Pentapod, yeah.
Pentapod. Yeah. But these are strong animals, with each hand and foot having rubber-like soles and each digit ending in claws that are hooked. And both of these features, plus, like I say, the strength in their muscles, allow for much better purchase on the more vertical faces of the trees that they inhabit. So they're incredibly good climbers. Now, it may also be observed that the tail is striped, and this, in fact, is unique to the individual, with each ornate tree kangaroo specimen having a different arrangement of brown and gold patterning along the tail's length. But it's unique to the individual, which I didn't know before doing this creature feature. Now, they're not the most impressively sized species, though they'd certainly stand larger than a few wallaby species. They weigh in at just 7.5 kilograms and measure around 80 centimeters. Their tail is actually a little bit longer, over a length of about 85 centimeters. So it's almost that it almost starts right halfway along their entire length. And this long striped tail is useful as well. Much like how their larger earthbound cousins use theirs for balance, these guys do as well, helping them remain steady as they navigate the various branches perching on trunks in their territory. And speaking of territory, they don't really have much of it. They are found solely in fragments of rainforest stretching from the Indonesian central Irian Jaya to the central and eastern parts of Papua New Guinea. Here, they inhabit the mountain ranges where rainforests and deciduous forests are thick and undisturbed. Well, with this range, they are a territorial species, and both sexes will defend their patch, though males cut out larger territories for themselves to facilitate bordering with multiple female territories and increasing their chances to successfully mate.
No, a bit like an orangutan then, sort of overlapping male over female territories.
Yeah, exactly. Now, their activity patterns are actually dictated by human disturbance. The closer to settlements they are, the more nocturnal they become, with those furthest from people displaying purely diurnal habits. And that suggests that diurnal preference is actually their natural default, which is really interesting when you see them in zoos and they're active during the day. But that's because they're obviously
calm and they're used to people.
So yeah, another kind of note that animals in good zoos, good functional zoos, are not stressed. Now, during those waking hours, they'll be observed nimbly coursing through the trees with admirable fearlessness, despite the fact they are incredibly clumsy on the ground. They spend much of this time foraging, and whilst they are keen consumers of the local silkwood leaves, they're also true omnivores. They'll ascend and descend through the tree canopy by sliding their forelimbs across the tree's surface, as their rear limbs essentially employ the typical kangaroo hop, but in a vertical fashion as opposed to horizontally. And they'll be doing this as they basically look for tempting morsels to tuck into, regularly dining on cereals, creepers, eggs, ferns, flowers, fruits, grass, insects, and shoots. As I said, the animals are territorial, and the males like to position themselves where they can best reach multiple females. They can mate any time of the year, so this choice in territory is not only a wise one, but an important one. The more neighbors that you have, the more likely you are to encounter them, and the more opportunities will present themselves for you to pass on your genes. A successful mating will result in a gestation of 21 to 38 days, after which, typical of marsupials, a single near-fetal joey will be born. This joey will traverse a path from where you imagine babies to originate to the entrance of the pouch. It needs no help to do this. Mum does not like pick it up and pop it in. It climbs its way there. It will then latch on to the lowermost teat to begin the next stage of its development, a process that can take up to a year to complete. After that first birthday, the joey may keep returning to the comfort of the pouch for a further 3 months. And whilst I've not seen this in tree kangaroos, I have seen it in kangaroos and wallabies, and it's incredibly comical to see a joey who is clearly too big for the pouch trying to fit in there and having its legs, arms, tail, and head sticking out in all kinds of awkward angles. And you just think, how have you done that to yourself? But they become completely independent at the age of 15 months 15 months old, and they're considered mature at 2 years old. So with any luck, an ornate tree kangaroo can live up to 14 years, but this is not without its challenges. Snakes, raptors, and potentially even New Guinea singing dogs are all said to prey upon tree kangaroos. And if that wasn't enough, cars, human poachers, feral domestic cats and dogs, plus the rapid and extensive destruction of rainforest habitats, all have pushed the ornate tree kangaroo to the very brink, justifying its categorization as endangered, according to the IUCN. Now, there are conservation efforts ongoing. Of the 14 species of tree kangaroo I alluded to near the beginning of this creature feature, only 5 of them are lucky enough to be represented in captive populations across the world. And so only those 5 are supported by ex situ breeding programs, like I say, in good functional zoos. But even this is not without its obstacles. According to WASA, the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which accredits decent zoological collections, there are only 55 individuals in total currently in captivity. And
out of those 5 species, you're saying that represent?
No, the 55 is just this.
Just the Goodfellows.
Yeah,
I was going to say that's slightly better.
Oh no. Sorry, this is 55 of those 5 species.
Oh, that's much worse.
Yeah.
That's where I was going originally.
So yeah, this represents a concerningly low genetic diversity, which WASA and the zoo community are working to remedy, whilst also being extremely careful in their breeding efforts to avoid, obviously, inbreeding. Now, whilst this is an issue in itself, it's nearly impossible to acquire new founder individuals, which means in the not so distant future, this issue, as I say, will become more than a little challenge to overcome. It will lead to a very serious ex situ situation as well, when there is no one left to breed with without inbreeding, and you're not getting any new founder specimens. And as we've said before in the past, zoos are incredibly to go out into the wild and collect founder specimens. You have to have justified that through a number of like flaming hoops. It's incredibly difficult.
Different world governments, all sorts of challenges. Is
the animal not better off being conserved in situ in its place? So there's a lot of hurdles to cross with that. Now, there is a WASA global species management plan in place for the species, and it started in 2013 and was facilitated by the ZAR, which is the Zoo and Aquarium Association of Australia. I think that Melbourne Zoo currently holds the stud book, but the management plan aims to integrate in situ conservation with the captive breeding program. It also has highlighted 2 priority conservation organizations to support in the Tenkile, I think it's Tenkile, it might be Tenkile. Tenkile Conservation Alliance and the Tree Kangaroo Conservation Program, with scope for a specific ornate tree kangaroo project being looked into. But with 50% of the wild population being lost over the course of just 3 generations, this species needs all the help and awareness it can get, making it one of the more serious additions to the Natural History Cupboard's roster and a justifiably worthy creature feature. There it is.
That's a disturbingly low level of animals.
Yeah.
The one thing that comes to mind, though, is when we talked to Dr. Pask about how the thylacine de-extinction will, in theory, help marsupials all across, the marsupial family. There might be some scope for trying to do some sort of, a way of broadening the horizons of tree kangaroo numbers
Yeah.
and things like that. I don't know how, obviously, but here's hope that there's a better future for them, because that's a disturbingly low level.
Low number, yeah. 50% decrease in wild population in just 3 generations, and only 55 individuals in captivity in
I
good
wonder
zoos.
if we could get someone on next year to talk about tree kangaroos.
That would be great. Yeah.
Someone from Melbourne Zoo.
I was going to say, maybe I'll contact Melbourne Zoo and see
Mm.
if someone there is willing to talk to us.
That would be, because if anything, this screams to be Australia's pangolin in some ways, or Australia and New
Papua New
Guinea's
Guinea, this one.
pangolin, because that's an animal that's in bad shape.
Yep.
In fact, I think pangolins are in better shape in captivity than these guys. Only
in captivity, probably just. Yeah.
But well, let's move on from that rather depressing ending, I suppose, and head into this week's emails.
Bing! You've got mail. Ooh, it's an email.
Right, well, we're into this week's emails. We're going to basically go into what has been a very popular one for people's comments last week's question, which was, you're hosting a natural history dinner party. You can only have 3 guests. They can be alive, dead, or even fictional. And what would you love to talk to them at length? Who are you inviting? Basically, who is your list of hypothetical guests? So the first comment we've got is from Jan Ashbridge. Russell Alfred Wallace, which is one that I think I would have quite happily put on there. Would love to discuss his work in Borneo. Sir Richard Owen went to school in her hometown of Lancashire. In Lancashire. Both my children went there too. Jane Goodall and David Attenborough. Oops, that's 4. Yes, it is.
Now you have the impossible task of eliminating one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Mark Palmer nominates Attenborough, Steve Backshaw, and Diane Fossey.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah.
Steve Eddy has put Sherlock, Carl Linnaeus, and Darwin, and in reserve he would have Gregor Mendelssohn. Sorry. So I believe you've replied to him with that one. No?
Yeah. I just said that Linnaeus is someone that I didn't think of.
Yeah, he would be interesting. He'd be sitting there classifying everything you're sitting there and eating. Of which Steve Eddy is then has replied saying, it takes a certain mind. We've replied then back going, hell of an interesting conversation opportunity from that lot. So yeah.
That was a good one. Our very own Drew Owens has said Charles Darwin, so I can ask him what his problem with marine iguanas is.
He has got some beef with Charles Darwin about marine iguanas.
Mary Annin, which I thought you was going to go for.
Yeah.
He says Mary Annin so that she can see her posthumous influence and recognition. And then Steve Irwin, so I can tell him I miss him.
Yeah.
So
yes. So we replied saying it's a cracking lineup.
Yeah.
So Pete Watts has put George Carlin. I think he would be amazing. Christopher Hutchins, Ken Bickle. We probably wouldn't talk much about natural history, to be honest, except maybe spaniels and possibly cormorants. I could see that. Which we replied, that's still a good lineup.
And our very own Jess Owens, again, she nominates Steve Irwin, Diane Fossey, David Attenborough. She also has some stand-ins, or Steve Backshaw, Michaela Strachan, and Nigel Marvin, and all of them are a hell of a collection.
I was going to say, I'd be quite happy to sit at the reserves table.
Yeah,
just as much. These are pretty powerful names.
Yeah.
Jen Babs has put, what a fabulous question. David Attenborough, Charles Darwin, and Steve Irwin are mine. The hubby has said Jacques Cousteau, Mary Anning, Johnny Morris, Some really good names there. Also, apparently, according to her dad, so potentially not true, she said, Captain Dampier, who Dampier Land was named after, is a long-distant relative of mine. He was a good pirate, whatever one of those actually is. He apparently was a natural history expert, and he could come to the party so I could question him about it. That'd be interesting, especially if you are related to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's then included an article about Dampier Land as well.
Saying, I think it says the title of which was William Dampier, revered and reviled.
There's a lot of these. I mean, depends. If you've stolen from someone, they're probably going to revile you. If you've given to someone, they're probably going to revere you.
Catherine Ames is next. She says Clint Laidlaw, Russ Wilson, and Peter Clausen.
Some good names there. I'd love to have a discussion with Clint Laidlaw. He's a fascinating one. Philip Schofield, Jean Delacour, Hubert Astley, and Raymond Sawyer.
And Leah Dorr comes to us with Steve Irwin, Dr. Grant, and can't think of a third. To which I said, "Do you have time to add it?" But she never did add to it.
See,
Dr. Grant was.
That was one that I thought. Yeah,
I think you thought I was going to say it too as well.
I do think it'd be fascinating. Michael D. Barton has put David Attenborough, Sylvia Erie, and Rachel Carson, or Charles Darwin, Alfred Wallace, and Thomas Henry Huxley. Or those three. That would be fascinating. Huxley, Darwin's bulldog. It would just be. I mean, you just know it'd be his hype man coming into the room. The one, the only Charles Darwin, like a full WWE entrance for Charles
like
Darwin.
Game of Thrones, like when they arrive and they have to announce all their titles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lord of the Beagle.
Rider of Tortoises.
Yeah.
The next comes to us Maria Malco, who says Clint Laidlaw, Jane Goodall, and Linda Rayner.
See, I think the one thing out of all of this,
Linda Rayor, I should say,
we would have to try and, if this hypothetical is happening, I'd invest in a bigger table.
Yeah, the roster of people that you guys have shouted out, it's pretty incredible.
It's the royalty.
I've met there's one or two names on there I'm not familiar with, but for the most part, I know all of them, and mind blowing to have dinner with any of them.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, I imagine it'd be one of those things. I mean, you could add so many more to that as well. William Buckland, Gideon Mantell. Do you know what I'd love to have?
I'd have Cope and drink. Cope
and Marsh.
Yeah, Cope and Marsh on both ends of the table.
And just introduced a little bit of alcohol.
Yeah. And the third person, not a naturalist, but WWE referee Tim White to sort it all out.
That could be a really interesting one. Yeah, it could be all hell breaks loose and people are throwing things. I imagine it would be very much that. Is it that cat meme?
That there's no pool table. There's just a pool cue there, just in case you wanted to use it.
But yes, that could be really interesting.
We're advocating for something.
I know some violence there. Yeah. So there's some really, really stunning answers there.
I think that's my favorite question that we asked.
We've done that. That's a really good one. So that was last week's question. This week's question, based on the fact that Wales's sheep population seems to be dropping, lamb or chicken? No. The question is, what animal do you best feel embodies your country? Wherever you are listening to us from around the world, basically tell us what animal you feel best describes your country. Of course.
Okay.
You could go with the obvious ones that are on like coats of arms. So Australia's got the emu and the kangaroo. New Zealand has the kiwi in that sort of sense. And Scotland has the amazing honor of being able to say it's got the unicorn as its national animal, which is ridiculous. In fact, it's just as ridiculous as England having a lion, because there are no lions in England other than ones in zoos and safari parks.
I was going to say, if it was like a paleo
artistic, we're doing paleo-wise,
of a cave lion, then they could get away with it.
That's fine, but you're about 10,000 years too late. So, Aaron, what animal do you think best symbolises? Well, you could either do the UK or you could do, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, that sort of thing.
Okay, so break the UK down then. So Wales, see, it's I know that real animal is you can't like you're supposed to think of sheep, but
You're not supposed to
well,
think
you
of
know,
sheep.
there's a lot of sheep there. It is unfortunately it's a stereotype that there are more sheep than people in Wales for a reason, because there is a lot of sheep there. But I
We live in
never
Devon.
think
There's
of
an awful
sheep.
lot of sheep here.
I never think of sheep when I think of Wales. I know it's not like a real animal, but I always think of dragons. So that is
Fair
what I
enough.
think of with Wales. And I can't really think of anything other than that animal wise up there. Um, uh, Scotland is an easy one for me. It's a really easy one for me. Scottish wildcat.
Yeah.
That the Scottish wildcat is sorry, European wildcat in Scotland is just a stunning animal. Yeah, and when I think of Scotland, that's what I think of. The other two are slightly more difficult. I mean, England, I could go with leopard, really, couldn't I? It's as elusive in Britain as our sovereignty. Sorry, that was a low blow. No, for England, I think it's might be red stag,
See,
red deer.
this is where I'm going to do the reverse on you, because I would have said red deer for Scotland because
Okay.
it's seen as the monarch of the Glen, you know.
Yeah,
But
yes,
I
yeah,
would
totally see that.
accept it for down here in the West Country.
Yes,
Exmoor and Dartmoor, so Devon and Cornwall, I would say the red stag gets to be its symbol.
yeah, I am gonna admit a bias there because I'm speaking from what I see
Yeah.
most of the time in England.
But I would
What would you go for with England then? Well, go on. You catch up, and I'll think of one for Northern Ireland.
so Scotland I'd have the stag. It's the monarch of the
Scotland's a
Glen.
stag.
It's that impressive animal.
Stag for you, wildcat for me.
For England, I'm going to go with the fox.
I almost went for fox.
I think the red fox symbolizes. I mean, they're found in pretty much every city and
Yep.
urban environment, so they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere, but also nothing sort of embodies that sort of upper class blah 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 of killing a fox, basically. So you know, the fact that we dislike that, which is very much illegal and not good, it is so interwoven into quintessentially English countryside sort of thing, the fox.
Yeah.
But I think it should be in there more because they are fascinating animals.
So Scotland, wildcats, red deer.
Yeah.
England, red deer, red fox.
Yeah.
What are you going with for Wales?
I'm going for another red animal.
Dragon.
No, I'm going for the red kite. Because the fact
yeah.
that they have reintroduced and done so well, and have just taken off, you know, I see them as a really beautiful bird that Wales has become their sort of jumping off point at re-establishing back into the country. I mean, you could also argue that Milton Keynes is just as good for them, but no one really wants an animal that is Milton Keynes's animal. It's a
Goodbye,
bit
listeners in Milton Keynes.
But for Northern Ireland, that's a hard one. I'd be tempted to say something like Natterjack toads. Really, can't remember if Natterjack.
I'm going to cut you off. Sorry, but I'm actually going to hop with Wales. I'm going to hop to your red kite because it's just I've just made the connection in my head that, you know, birds are reptiles, dragons are reptiles,
right?
And it's both of them are red. Kites are the red dragons.
Fair enough.
So there we go. There we go. I've made it to a real animal now.
I like it. I like it.
Northern Ireland's really difficult for me though.
Hare, Irish hare. Yeah, it's literally called an Irish hare, and they have deep mystical Celtic symbolism. So
yeah. Okay.
Hares, I think that's what gets it there for me.
For me, adders.
Slight problem with that, you know, the whole St. Patrick thing.
Yeah, well, it's the fact that someone like mischievously introduced them over there.
Sneak them in,
Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, I actually don't have a good answer for Northern Ireland, and I feel a little bit ashamed of that.
Fair enough.
Sorry, Ireland.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what we think. But if you live anywhere else in the world, let us know what you think your animals that best symbolizes your country, best embodies it, is down in the comments on our Facebook page. You can also do so on our YouTube comments as well. So if you're watching this, chuck it in the comments and we will try and answer that one as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is one way to get in contact with us. Another way is via our emails, which is the nathistorykupboard@gmail.com.
Yep.
Where you can send us whatever you would like to send us, whether it's news articles that you think we might cover, interesting information about new species or something like that. That's always fun to throw in there, or just to say hi. You can get in contact with us that way. The other way you can get in contact with us is by being one of our Patreons, by helping the channel to grow, by getting involved directly. And Aaron's going to tell us all about them, our wonderful Patreons, right now.
That's right. Every week we love to give a little love. We love to give a little love back to all of our wonderful Patreon supporters. Now, these are the cupboard dwellers who have been kind enough to support us through a monetary contribution, for which we are grateful beyond words. And those people are, of course, Fogtober, Jen Greenhall, Connie P, Chelsea McKee, Nick to Nick, and Matthew Jedi. Which, until he corrects me on
You're gonna keep going with that.
I'm calling you Jedi. Which is probably why he's not correcting me. Guys, your financial contributions are actively helping us here in the Natural History Cupboard in a myriad of ways, and we really cannot thank you enough. Now, we appreciate everything that all of our cupboard dwellers do for us to support us, whether that's through watching and listening, or sharing, subscribing, liking, and just being a bit of a evangelist for the cupboard and getting us out there and getting us known. But if you feel we've earned it and you're considering joining our Patreon, there are two options through which you can do so. That is the Nature Nerds and the Animal Ambassadors, and there'll be more info about those on the Patreon site itself. But with that said, once again, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very, very much.
Yeah, massive thank you. And like Aaron said, there are a variety of ways that you can get involved that don't cost anything to do. That's everything from liking, subscribing, commenting on whatever you are consuming this media on. We're getting a lot more comments on different things these days.
Yeah, it's nice.
On stuff that's really good. You guys are basically telling us what you think about absolutely everything, which is good. So yeah, on whatever platform you're viewing us on, feel free to say hello, say whatever, and like, share, subscribe. That basically pushes us out there and gets people to know all about us. But that pretty much brings us to the end of this week's episode.
Yeah, yes, it does. Yeah,
it does. It does indeed.
It does indeed.
So, well, big thank you, Eric. It was a good tree kangaroo.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one. That was good because it was one that I knew about, but one that I also, there was a few blank spaces that had to be filled in on it, so I got to learn a little bit about it too.
Yeah, they're really cool, and I feel a bit depressed at how few there are, but
yes, but
knowledge is power, and now we know.
Yeah, the takeaway from that was that zoos are actually doing something. There is in situ conservation, and there are zoos that are actually actively involved in trying to help out. And on top of that, the fact that a lot of the time our creature features, they're extinct animals, or they're animals that are particularly close to our hearts. Sometimes there's an animal that might not be particularly close to our hearts, but is creeping towards extinction without anybody really noticing. And I think the tree kangaroo is one of them. That one is one of the most, it might not be one of the best creature features. That's for you all to judge, but it is one. I feel it was one of the most important animals we've featured. I think there are others, obviously, but yeah.
Well, that's good. So yeah, and a big thank you to you at home for being with us. And we'll see you next time here in the Natural History Cupboard. Bye.
Just bye. One does not simply hop up a tree.
Quite true.